Hello, darlings. My name is Samuel, aka the SP Chef. I am an ex-Scientologist who grew up in Scientology. When I was 9 years old, I signed the so-called billionaire contract to work for the elite organization of Scientology called the Sea Org. Then with 13, my parents and I, we were brought to England at St. Hill, which is where I worked from 13 until the age of 20. A few years before that, my two siblings were sent off to Denmark to work there for the Sea Org. Then, as I said, until the age of 20, I worked at St. Hill as a SIG member. I then left. I was still very much a Scientologist. I just didn't work for Scientology anymore. And then with about 25, that's when my brainwashing really pretty much wore off. I had been already on the internet a little bit, been looking up Scientology. And then with about 25, I was able to say to myself, no, I'm not a Scientologist anymore. And since then, when I was 31, I gave my first public interview. And since then, I have started this YouTube channel where I talk about my own story, my experiences, things I've witnessed. I talk about Scientology, trying to explain it, trying to make sense of the thing that makes absolutely no sense at all. And I have been having conversations with other ex-Scientologists, other ex-cult members, with people who were never in the cult, but very much are part of the movement to try to expose the abuses in Scientology. And part of that is, of course, going out and doing protests. I have only done 3 protests so far. I've done one at St. Hill, which is where I worked, and my mother still works there. And I did 2 in Denmark in the headquarters, the European headquarters for Scientology, where my 2 siblings used to work. Thankfully, they're not part of the SIG anymore. However, they're still Scientologists and have since disconnected from me, so they're not allowed to talk to me. The same with my parents, of course. So, but the times that I did go on these protests, what I encountered was, of course, I became very nervous. Now, I think it's quite normal to get nervous, but what happens with me, I stumble over my words. I'm not quite sure of a reference. If I talk about, for example, I want to talk about, well, what does Scientology say about children, for example? And I want to quote something, and then I'm afraid, did I get the quote right? Is it quite right? Do I remember exactly from where the quote was? Or if I talk to somebody explaining them what happens to you if you dare to leave Scientology. If I talk to them about the fair game policy. If I talk to them why it is that you cannot be a Christian and a Scientologist. It just doesn't work. And so I find myself either misquoting it or not saying it quite with enough confidence. And of course, one mustn't forget that if you're talking to people, either because you approach them or they come to you with interest, oh, what are you doing here exactly? It could very well be that it is an undercover Scientologist. And in Scientology, a very important piece of information is, if it isn't written, it isn't true. So verbal information you cannot really take seriously. So if somebody says, well, this is what Hubbard said, this is what Hubbard has done, and so on and so forth, they can sort of dismiss it because it's not really written anywhere. They don't have the policy, they don't have the reference from where this is actually from. So this is why I made for myself a little aid for that. Now, I showed this aid to a couple of friends of mine, with whom I've protested in the past, and their feedback was so positive that I felt, well, perhaps this could be something interesting for more than just for myself. So I thought I'll share it with the class, so to speak. So let me just briefly show you what it is. So I have it here on a chain, and I have basically these little notes, and they look laminated. They're not laminated. What it is, it's just I put sellotape over them, so they're a little bit waterproof. And then I just took different subjects. For example, here we have the subject of children, the subject of leaving Scientology, what happens to you, the subject of fair game, on Christianity, and so on and so forth. And the idea of this is you have this around your neck, and then you can, so that way your hands are free as well. And if somebody were to come up or you approach somebody and you want to talk to them about what happens to children or how children are regarded, why you cannot be a Christian and Scientologist, and so on and so forth, you can actually show them. So I will in this video also read out everything that I've written, and down in the description of this video I will have everything that I've written on these cards will be down there, so you can just go over it with your mouse and just copy paste if you want to have this. And the beauty of this is also because I've done it the way I've done it, with just you have a hole and you can just put it on a keychain. If you want to add something else to it, you can add something else to it. If, for example, you are protesting in the States, maybe a more relevant thing to add on there are all the criminal charges that have been put in action, and you can put that in there. Put things that are maybe more relevant to where you are locally, or what is for you personally more important because of your own experiences. Or, of course, what you realize what people are most interested in, and then the cards that you don't really need, you can just get rid of them, or you can add to them as much as you want. And that way you always have them right here. You don't have to, take out your phone and sort of trying to look for it if you've done screenshots or anything like that. It is a bit old-fashioned because it is written like that, but sometimes the old-fashioned stuff still works quite marvelously in the 21st century, I dare say. So that's basically what it is. I haven't really given this a name, but I don't think it really needs anything like that. But let me read these out to you so you have some idea of how I've done it and what I've written down. So the first one is on children. The 7-year-old girl who shudders because a man kisses her is not computing. She's reacting to an engram, since at 7 she should see nothing wrong with a kiss, not even a passionate one. DIANETICS, the modern science of mental health. Children are beings and are to be treated as such. They work in the division of the org and come under the Sea Org staff member. They are to be given post, stand watches, and are provided uniforms. Flag Order 485, 7th of March 1968. So flag order, or short FO, are references written only specifically to be seen by Sea Org members. So regular Scientologists, they're not supposed to see that. So here he says very clearly that children are supposed to work the same hours as everybody else, be able to stand watch, and are provided a uniform, and to be given a post. A post is basically a job. That's how it's called in Scientology. And then here's the next FO, to make it just a bit more clear what he means by that. Every Sea Org member must be included on the WQSB and org board regardless, age 6 and above. Flag Order 780 from the 29th of May 1968. So from the age 6 and above, you're supposed to be a full Sea Org member, and you have to be part of everything. Now, the WQSB, so what I did, so here's the card. If you flip it up here, I basically put what it means, the definition of it. The WQSB, Watch Quarter Station Bill. This is a large chart that is located in the Sea Org that lists out where each person lives, what their cleaning station is, whether they are on port or starboard watch, and any number of other details about the person. Now, what does it mean to be port or starboard? Now, of course, port and starboard on a ship, that is clear, that is the right side, the left side. What that means in the Sea Org, you basically have each organization, because there are different organizations within this Sea organization, is divided in two. You have one part of the staff members, Sea Org members, are on the port, the other part on starboard. And the idea of that is that if one side is missing, they're somewhere else, the other side will take on their work. So this is most relevant when you want to take a half day off, because you can't actually take a full day off in the Sea Org, at least not at St. Hill, where I worked. You can only take half a day off every second Saturday. So every second, because on 1 week it is port week, and then the next week is starboard week. So if I were on port week, I had to make sure that my statistic was up and everything else was in order. I had to find a replacement, and I had to make sure that all of my seniors, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 seniors above me, all have to approve of it. Now the problem is you have to find a replacement. However, you work for 14 to 18 hours a day, every day. Everybody else does that too. So you have to find somebody who takes on your work, as well as them still being able to do their own work. Now, sometimes it works out, but because this is so difficult, most Sea Org members never take a day off. But that is what it means to be port or starboard. So that is the WQSB. It's basically a board where it shows everything where, these people, they have to clean here, this is their responsibilities, and so on and so forth. So let me just read that again for you. Every Sea Org member must be included on a WQSB and org board regardless. The org board is a board of the organization where it shows all the different positions, the different posts, the different jobs that are there. On the WQSB and org board regardless, age 6 and above. So from the age 6 and above, you have full-time Sea Org member. And this is from Flag Order 780 from the 29th of May 1968. So this just shows you that such a thing as a child doesn't really exist. All the way up to age 6, you're just about tolerated to be a child. But above that, you are a full Sea Org member. You are seen as an adult. Okay, the next card is on leaving Scientology. In Scientology, we have the phenomenon of pre-clears in session or students on course deciding to leave and never coming back. And that gives us more trouble than most other things all combined. In other words, they will do whatever they can to make sure you don't leave, because you leaving gives them a huge headache. It goes on the same reference. People leave because of their own overts and withholds. That is the factual fact and the heart-bound rule. A man with a clean heart can't be hurt. So you only leave because you've done bad things. Now, overts and withholds, just to explain, an overt is a discretion, a crime that you've committed. A withhold is basically if you withhold information. If you keep secret, that's a withhold. So only somebody who has done overts and withholds, only that sort of person would leave the organization. A man with a clean heart can't be hurt. Interesting, isn't it? It goes on the same reference. The answer lies in Scientology and processing the person up to a high enough responsibility to take a job or a position and carry it out without all this weird hocus pocus of, I've got to say you're doing things to me so I can leave and protect you from all the bad things I'm doing to you. That's the way it is, and it doesn't make sense not to do something about it now that we know. So in other words, only through Scientology can you bring a person up to a high enough level of, what does he say exactly? Responsibility. And because he has a high level of responsibility, he can take much more abuse. Because at some point, he might say that you have done this to me, because of you, I have not been able to sleep properly for the last seven days. I have been working more than 100 hours this week. I haven't been paid for 5 weeks. Well, these are all excuses, you see. Because this is what he says. This is this hocus pocus that these staff members dare to say. Oh, I've got to say you're doing things to me so I can leave and protect you from all the bad things I'm doing to you. In other words, because you are so evil and you're doing such bad things, you want to remove yourself from the group. You want to protect the group. And that is why you want to leave. That is the reason why you want to leave. It is not because actually bad things have happened to you and you've just had enough. No, it's because you are doing bad things or are planning to do bad things, and so you are finding an excuse to leave the group. It goes on the same reference. A recent secretarial executive director to all central organizations state that before a person may draw his last paycheck from an organization he is leaving of his own volition, he must write down all his overts and withholds against the organization and its related personnel and have these checked out by the HO secretary on an e-meter. To do less than this is cruelty itself. So, if you said as a staff member, now this is as a staff member in a smaller class 5 organization, but this is also relevant for somebody who's in a SEOC. If you said you've had enough, you want to get out of here, you've worked so hard, you've gotten nothing but abuse, and you just want to leave now, you can only get your last pay once you have written down all your overts and all your withholds. So you have to write down all the bad things you have done. However, who decides that you've done enough, that you've written down enough? Well, of course, Scientology is going to tell you, oh no, you need to write down more. And then once that is done, you will be put on an e-meter to check, to make sure there are no other overts and withholds there. Because of course, as I said earlier, the only reason why you would want to leave is because you have committed overts and withholds, because you have committed crimes, not because you were abused. No, not at all. So this is from an HOB from the 31st of December from 1959. However, it doesn't say 1959. It says AD 9. Now, if you want to know what an absolute narcissist Hubbard was, this is it. So for several years, he would write policies, and he, rather than put the date, in this case 1959, he would write AD 9. Now, AD comes from the Latin meaning Anno Domini. So Anno Domini is usually what we would do when you write down a regular date. For example, I was born 1992, AD, Anno Domini, so 1992 years after the birth of Christ. And that's what the AD stands for. However, he put the AD for Anno DIANETICS. So DIANETICS came out in 1950. So this is 9 years after it came out. So the book Dianetics, he compares the same as the birth of Christ. I mean, how absolutely narcissistic do you have to be to compare yourself, not even yourself, but your book, your creation, one could even say his own creation, as being as important to the world as the birth of Christ. It goes on, I've got on the other side more. So it says, the suppressive person, whom we've called a merchant of fear or chaos merchant, and which we can now technically call the suppressive person, can't stand the idea of Scientology. If people become better, the suppressive person would have lost. The suppressive person answers this by attacking covertly or overtly Scientology. So, if you criticize Scientology, if you say it is abusive, if you attack it in any sort of way, it is because you are suppressive. It is because you cannot stand the idea that somebody can improve in life. And that is why you must attack Scientology. So this is why Scientologists, they see all sort of criticism, all sort of attack as a direct attack to destroy humanity, to basically trying to hinder humanity to improve themselves. It goes on the same reference. But where the student leaves the premises in a blow is an unauthorized leave. But when the student leaves the premises in a blow or doesn't turn up for the class, the tech division must send an instructor and the student's auditor over to HCO Department of Inspection and Reports. An HCO representative should go with them at once to pick up the student. So if you dare to not show up at student hour, you're supposed to do a course or whatever, you're supposed to go on in auditing in Scientology, and you don't show up because maybe you don't want to do it, maybe something else came up, whatever it might be, they need to go to HCO, which is their ethics department, their justice department, right? They need to report that you are missing, and then they're going to go out and get you. They're going to go out and trying to find you. An HCO representative should go with them at once to pick up the student. Absolutely ridiculous. This is from HCOPL, 5th of April 1965. Then here's another one. When you get in ethics, the decent one raises his necessity level and measures up. The suppressive type leaves. Again, beautiful. It is unbelievable what it actually says. When you get in ethics, the decent one raises his necessity level. So in other words, if you enforce ethics and the rules, the decent person, he raises, it says, his necessity level. For me, this is another way of saying he's raising his level, his tolerance of abuse, and measures up. He measures up to the task at hand. Of course, they want to clear the planet. The suppressive type blows. So the suppressive person is the one who says, you know what, I've had enough of this. This is too much. I haven't slept in 3 days. I haven't had pay for so long. I haven't eaten anything properly. We're not really doing anything. The person who sets boundary is a suppressive person and leaves. So this is what it says. HUPL from the 1st of October 1967. Admin know-how uses of orgs. That's what it is called. All right, the next card is on fair game. By fair game is meant may not be further protected by the codes and disciplines of Scientology or the rights of a Scientologist. It goes on. The families and adherents of suppressive persons or groups may not receive processing. It does not matter whether they are or are not Scientologists. If the families or adherents of suppressive persons or groups are processed, any auditor doing so is guilty of a misdemeanor. See HCO Policy Letter of 7th of March 1965, Issue 2, Suppressive Acts, Suppression of Scientology and Scientologists. This is from the Fair Game Law of HOPL, 23rd of December 1965. So this shows you that if you are connected with somebody who is doing a suppressive act, whether that person ever was a Scientologist or not, it doesn't matter, you have to disconnect from the person, because that person, just being connected with the person, is hindering your process in Scientology. You cannot go on in session. You cannot do session, so you cannot improve yourself unless that person is not part of your life anymore. So this basically shows why family members disconnect. Why my brother disconnected from me, my sister, my father, my mother. Here's another reference. SP order, fair game, may be deprived of property or injured by any means by any Scientologist without any discipline of the Scientologist, may be tricked, sued, lied to, or destroyed. Penalties for lower condition, HUPL, 23rd of December 1967. Okay, so the first one was from 1965, called the Fair Game Law. Then this one is 1967. Now the next one is very interesting. The practice of declaring people fair game will cease. Fair game may not appear on any ethics order. It causes bad public relations. This PL does not cancel any policy on the treatment or handling of an SP. Cancellation of fair game, HOPL 21st of October 1968. So it says here, oh, it's been cancelled. Well, what exactly has been cancelled? Let's look at that. The practice of declaring people fair game will cease. So you're not officially allowed to declare them as fair game. Fair game may not appear on ethics order. They are not allowed to be written down. So in other words, you're not allowed to make a paper trail of this. And then it says, as a reason, it causes bad public relations. In other words, it looks bad. It didn't say because it causes too much upset, because crimes were committed, because people were harmed, people were injured. No, none of that. It just looks bad. That's the only reason. And then it goes on, of course. This PL, policy letter, does not cancel any policy on the treatment or handling of an SP. So in other words, they can keep on going. They're just not allowed to leave a paper trail. That's all what it means. The next one, on Christianity. Now, the first one I'm going to read is about religion generally speaking, and then the next two is about Christianity. With the exception of the original Buddhism, so not the Buddhism that is practiced these days, but the original one. With the exception of the original Buddhism, virtually all religions of any consequence on this planet, mono or pantheistic alike, so mono being a religion where it only has one god, pantheistic are religions where there are several gods, more than just one, alike, have been instruments to speed the progress of the evolution of consciousness and bring about the eventual enslavement of mankind. Basically, all religions are there to enslave mankind. For those of whose Christian toes I may have stepped on, let me take the opportunity to disabuse you of some lovely myths. For instance, the historic Jesus was not nearly the sainted figure he has been made out to be. In addition of being a lover of young boys and men, he was given to uncontrollable bursts of temper and hatred that belied the general message of love, understanding, and other typical macabre PR. You have only to look at the history his teachings inspired to see where it all inevitably leads. It is historic fact, and yet man still clings to the idea. So deep and insidious is the biological implanting. Now here we came over a word or a group of people called macabre. Now what are the macabre? Let me flip over the card and it says here, macabre. In Scientology, the macabre confederacy is depicted as a vast, decaded galactic civilization that once ruled over a large number of planets and is described as having enslaved billions of people. They are also portrayed as having used Earth as a prison planet for their subjects. Scientologists who have achieved the operating thetan, OT levels, are said to be able to avoid the macabre's control after death, unlike others who are subjected to brainwashing and reincarnated at the implant station. To briefly explain this, in Scientology, the belief is you're an immortal spiritual being, and when you die, you just get reborn every time. But every time when you die, you get sucked on an implant station that is located on the back of the moon. There you will be, as a spirit, be strapped on a machine where your memory will be wiped and implant memories will be put in your mind, and then you get shot back down on Earth and you get reborn, and it's an endless cycle. And in Scientology, the goal is to become an OT, so you can escape this cycle. Okay, and you can only do this once you have reached a higher OT level. It then goes on the same reference. No doubt you are familiar with the Revelation section of the Bible, where various events are predicted. Also mentioned is a brief period of time in which an arch-enemy of Christ, referred to as the Antichrist, represents the forces of Lucifer, literally the light bearer or light bringer. Lucifer being a mythical representation of the forces of enlightenment, the Galactic Confederacy. My mission could be said to fulfill the biblical promise represented by this brief Antichrist period. In other words, Hubbard describes himself as being the Antichrist. I mean, this is crazy. So this is all from a student briefing of OT8 Series 1, Hatred Bulletin from the 5th of May 1980. So this you can only read once you have reached OT level 8, or rather once you're studying to become OT level 8. Everybody below that would never have read this, but this shows you what Hubbard thought of other religions and particularly Christianity. Now here's one of my favorite ones. Medical claims. Cure migraines. DIANETICS 1950. Improve eyesight. DIANETICS Auditors Bulletins, Volume 2, from the 7th of January 1952, An Afternoon with Ron. Cure brainwashing. HOB, 19th of December 1955. The Turn of the Tide. Cure arthritis. A History of Man, 1961. Cure cancer. A History of Man, 1961. Cure bronchitis. HOB, 14th of December 1963. Case Analysis Health Research. Cure a broken ankle. HOB, 30th of July 1973. Cure skin cancer. All About Radiation, 1979. Cure radiation sickness. All About Radiation, 1979. And then here's a couple of quotes. Scientology is more exact than what are called the physical sciences. From the book Scientology 808. Another quote. Scientology is the only workable system man has. It has already taken people towards higher IQ, better lives and all that. No other system has. So, realize that it has no competitors. And this is from a book called Introduction to Scientology Ethics. Now I'm going to come to a card which is simply titled as Below 2.0 on the Tone Scale. In Scientology, you have a tone scale of human emotions, where Hubbard basically depicted all human emotions, well, that a human can go through life. It goes from plus 40 to 0.0, which is body death, and it goes below body death to minus 40.0. In other words, there are conditions, there are emotions that are less desirable than physical death. So it would be better for you to be dead than being below these emotions. So let me read this out to you. In any event, any person from 2.0 down on the tone scale should not have in any thinking society any civil rights of any kind, because by abusing those rights he brings into being arduous and strenuous laws which are oppressive to those who need no such restraint, signs of survival. So he's saying people who are below 2.0 on this tone scale, they have absolutely no rights. They shouldn't have any civil rights at all. And so I put in here some of these tone scales. So we have 2.5 boredom, so that's still above 2.0, so that's still okay. 2.4 monotony, still okay. Then we got 2.0 antagonism. So we're getting dangerous now. And now I'm going to I added a bunch of other emotions, not everything, all the way down to minus 40.0 for one, because there's no space. And for the others, I just added emotions that I thought were relevant, were things that people will have heard of and understand what is meant by that. So 2.0 is antagonism. Then we've got 1.8 pain, 1.1 covert hostility, 1.0 fear, 0.5 grief, 0.0 body death, minus 0.1 pity, minus 1.0 blame, minus 1.3 regret, and finally minus 40.0 total failure. I find this minus 0.3 regret particularly interesting because have you noticed Scientology cannot regret anything. They always have to attack. They can never defend. They can never state they can never put out a statement saying we're very sorry that this happened, that we have done that. We will try to improve. We will make up the damage or anything like that. You cannot show regret in Scientology. And here you see why. Because it is at minus 1.3. Then I put down there something from myself, an observation of mine. I wrote, neither love nor empathy is on the tone scale. So if the tone scale of human emotions, but not love nor empathy is on there. And I think this is very telling for Hubbard. And then we've got here a lovely little quote. We'd rather have you dead than incapable. This is from Keeping Scientology Working from the 7th of January 1965. It was reissued on the 27th of August 1980. Okay. And the final card that I have is on homosexuality because, of course, in Scientology, they say these days, oh, you can be a homosexual, you can be gay, it's no problem at all, you can come in and do Scientology, it's no problem at all. But this is what Scientologists think of Scientology and, of course, what Hubbard wrote about them. The sexual pervert, and by this term, Dianetics, to be brief, includes any and all forms of deviation of dynamic 2. So in Scientology, you have got the 8 dynamics of existence, and dynamic 1 is yourself. Dynamic 2 would be the family, including as well sex. So this is what he's talking about. All form of deviation in dynamic 2, i.e. sexuality, such as homosexuality, lesbianism, sexual sadism, etc., is actually quite ill physically. But he is also far from normal and extremely dangerous to society. This comes from Dianetics, the modern science of mental health. I've mentioned this book before. It was published in 1950. It is arguably one of the most important books in Scientology, and it's still being published now, and this still says in there now. They cannot alter. Scientology could never go through a reformation because Hubbard says very clearly you cannot alter his so-called technology, his wisdom. And then here's another quote. 1.1, the level of the pervert. So remember, 1.1, this is covert hostility, and it is below 2.0, so bad, bad, bad. 1.1, the level of the pervert, the hypocrite, the turncoat. Such people should be taken from the society as rapidly as possible and uniformly institutionalized. For here is the level of the contagious of immorality and the destruction of ethics. Here is the fodder which secret police organizations use for their filthy operations. One of the most effective measures of security that a nation threatened by war could take would be rounding up and placing in a containment away from society any 1.1 individual. Remember, 1.1, covert hostility, below 2.0, the level of the pervert. And here he writes, in Dianetics, the sexual pervert, and by this term, Dianetics, to be brief, includes any and all form of deviation dynamic 2, i.e. sexuality, such as homosexuality, lesbianism, sexual sadism, etc. So it's very clear, he's talking about homosexual, lesbians, and so on. And this is from a book that came shortly after Dianetics called Science of Survival. So these are the cards I've made so far. Over the years, I will add another card. I might take another card out. I might add a bit more on a card that I already have. And I find the system very helpful for me. It calms me down. I have all the information I need right here, readily at my fingertips, so to speak. And so I do hope you found this interesting, informative, dare I say educational, and perhaps you can use this yourself at a future protest, or just use these references. As I said, I have them all down in the description, so you can just copy, paste that, and just use it as you wish. I wanted to say a particular shout out to the channel members I still have. I thank you very much. I know I post very little at the moment, but I really appreciate that you are my channel members. If you find my context interesting, then please make sure to hit the like button, maybe subscribe, check out other videos that I have. Leave a comment down below if you have questions, if you have uncertainty, if you want to get in contact with me directly, you can just write me an email at thespchef@gmail.com. You can just write to me and we can have a little chat if you wish. With that, I wish you a most marvelous day and excellent rest of the week. Goodbye.